Emily hurried along the platform, breathing in the cool, dense air of the autumn evening. A light mist curled above the rails, mingling with the scent of metal and the distant smoke from the locomotive. In the waiting hall reigned a special, cozy bustle. The soft hum of voices, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, and the damp coats brought in from the street where rain had only recently passed. The train was already trembling in anticipation of the journey, like an impatient creature ready to leap forward. Slightly out of breath from hurrying, Emily took her seat by the window. The soft glow of the carriage lamps fell onto the pages of the book she pulled from her bag. Outside the glass, rows of dim lanterns and pearly puddles reflecting the lights of the platform. The road promised to be quiet, but the evening, special. The carriage door creaked softly, letting a stream of cold, damp air spill into the warm glow of the cabin. On the threshold appeared a tall man in a long dark coat. In his hand he carried a small, well-traveled suitcase, and in his eyes there was a weariness, as if this day had stretched not for hours, but for an eternity. His steps were slightly slowed, as though his legs still remembered a long road. He placed the suitcase on the overhead rack and sank into the seat opposite Emily. Their eyes met for a brief moment. She noticed a faint, polite smile, as if he wanted to show that everything was fine. But something in his face told a different story. Minutes later, the color drained from his cheeks. The faint flush gave way to a chalky pallor, his lips pressing together slightly. His hand, almost by habit, found the armrest and gripped it, as if trying to hold on to this small piece of solid reality. His gaze grew unfocused, his breathing a touch heavier. He leaned forward, as though seeking rest, but there was weakness in that movement rather than fatigue. "Are you all right?" Emily set her book aside, feeling a ripple of concern stir within her, and leaned slightly toward the man. "A little dizzy." His voice was quiet, hoarse, as if each word cost him an effort. Her professional instinct kicked in instantly. The relaxed gaze of a passenger vanished from her eyes, replaced by the focused look of a doctor. She gently touched his wrist, feeling for a pulse. Warm skin, but beneath her fingers. A faint tremor. The rhythm was uneven, slightly quickened, and she didn't like it at all. "Breathe deeper." Just like that. Her voice became soft, almost soothing. The man obeyed, drawing in a breath, but his exhale came with noticeable strain. Emily reached for her bag, pulled out a small bottle of water, its cap clicking in the quiet of the carriage, and offered it to him. From a side pocket came a small plastic pillbox, the familiar kit she always carried on trips, just in case help was suddenly needed. She placed the pills in his palm, her gaze silently saying, "You're not alone. I'm here." Outside, station lights flickered past, and the carriage seemed to grow quieter. Even the sound of the wheels felt muted, giving way to this small but vital scene. The man took a couple of sips, carefully, as if afraid to spill. His throat moved almost imperceptibly, and a shadow of relief appeared on his face. He drew a deep breath, then another, and his shoulders sank slightly, the tension in them easing. "Thank you," he said quietly, looking at Emily a moment longer than simple courtesy required. There was not just gratitude in his gaze, but a quiet surprise. A stranger, by mere chance beside him, had suddenly become his support in that moment. "You need to get some rest," she said with a gentle smile. "The train ride is long. There's no need to hurry." He nodded, and, leaning on the armrest, settled in more comfortably. His fingers still trembled slightly, but the pallor had begun to fade, giving way to the warm flush of life. "I'm John," he said, still hoarsely, but with more confidence now. "Emily," she replied, and in that brief exchange of names there was something more than formality. The train swayed gently, and outside the autumn landscape was sinking into the deepening twilight. The lamps inside the carriage cast a warm amber glow across their faces. And strangely enough, this chance evening journey was beginning to feel to them both like more than just a trip from point A to point B. It felt like the beginning of something new. The train was slowing down, its wheels knocking dully, as if counting the last seconds of their journey together. Outside, the lights of the station were already visible, familiar, almost homelike to Emily. Yet now they seemed colder than usual. She closed the book she had never opened again and rose unhurriedly. John watched her a moment longer than was customary between casual fellow travelers. In his eyes there was something she was afraid to name aloud, tenderness laced with a hint of longing. "You know," he said softly, as if afraid to disturb the coziness of their little carriage, "most trips just pass by, dissolve into memory. But this one will stay." Emily felt a quiet stir in her chest. She smiled, not just politely, but as if she wanted to keep his words in her heart. They exchanged phone numbers, and her hand lingered in his a moment longer than necessary, as if it didn't want to let go. The carriage doors swung open, letting in the night air scented with wet leaves. She stepped onto the platform and looked back. John was still sitting by the window, and in the lamplight his silhouette seemed almost unreal. Then came the weeks. At first, short messages, polite, but with the faintest hints that the conversation was something they wished to continue. Then, long exchanges in the evenings when it was dark outside, and words somehow became more candid than they could be in person. Sometimes he came to her city on business, and each time those business matters ended with a walk over coffee and long conversations. Sometimes she found a reason to be in his, and each time they met, they caught themselves already looking forward to the next meeting. Even if they had only just said goodbye, time passed and they grew more accustomed to each other. With each passing day, it became clearer. Their relationship was not just friendship. It was a feeling that could not be hidden and could only be called by one name: love. One warm day, as spring was drawing to a close and the air was filled with the scent of blooming gardens, John, with a noticeable heaviness in his voice, said that he had to go abroad for work. He was being sent away, and no one knew how long he would be gone. Emily didn't want to let him go. Everything inside her was screaming, "Stay," but there was no choice. John gently embraced her and whispered softly, "I'll come back. Wait for me." The day of his departure was overcast. She saw him off at the airport, holding his hand until the very last moment. He smiled, trying to hide his own anxiety, while she waved until he disappeared behind the doors of the departure hall. And at that very moment, as his figure vanished, Emily's heart clenched painfully, as if sending a quiet alarm signal. You may never see him again. But she refused to believe it. She loved him, and love could not simply end like that. John boarded the plane. The enormous steel bird rose into the sky, slicing through the clouds with ease. The flight went smoothly, nothing seemed amiss. But upon landing, one of the wheels failed to deploy. The crew tried until the last moment to correct the situation, But the aircraft went in for a hard landing. A flash, the roar of metal, screams. And in one terrifying second, it was over. The plane crashed. Everyone on board perished. The phone rang early in the morning. Outside, the fog still hung low, and the first rays of sunlight barely pierced the thick veil of clouds. Emily, still drowsy, picked up the receiver, expecting to hear John's familiar voice. But instead, a dry official tone came through the line. "Are you aware of passenger on flight 317? The woman on the other end paused, as if gathering her strength. "We're sorry. There was an accident. There were no survivors." The words sounded hollow, as if spoken from a distance, through a thick layer of water. Emily felt her legs give out, and she sank straight to the floor. The phone slipped from her hands, hitting the carpet, and her heart collided with reality. She stared at a single point, unblinking. Her mind tried to cling to something logical. No, this must be a mistake. He promised. He was supposed to come back. But the cold emptiness in her chest grew, erasing all hope. Emily ran outside, as if fresh air could wake her from this nightmare. But the morning was too quiet, too real. Everything around continued to live, while her world had just collapsed. She remembered his last smile at the airport, his words, "I'll come back. Wait for me." And in that moment, her heart understood what her mind still refused to accept. There was no one left to wait for. The first days after the tragedy were like a fog. Emily woke up out of habit, reaching for her phone to read his messages, and only then remembered. The house was filled with oppressive silence, and every sound seemed unbearably loud. She often found herself speaking to him in her mind, telling him how her day had gone, sharing little details, joking, as if he were still there. In the evenings, she would pull out their correspondence from a drawer, rereading the lines until the letters blurred with her tears. But time passed. The pain grew a little quieter, and the memories warmer. She began going back to work, meeting friends, laughing. The world around her hadn't stopped being beautiful. It just now contained one quiet place where John lived. Her memory of him. On one spring day, almost a year later, Emily was sitting in a park with a book. The sun shone softly, the wind playing in her hair. She closed her eyes, and without knowing why, suddenly felt as if he were standing somewhere very close. She opened the book, but before immersing herself in reading again, she whispered softly, "I'm living, John, just as you wanted, and I will love you always." And in her heart there was no longer desperate pain, only a bright, eternal love that nothing and no one could ever take away.